welcome to session 4, last session of the day. You can take it away, Ron.
Thank you so much, Courtney. I mean, this has been an amazing day. I don't know about you guys, but I've got a few pages of notes. And thanks to Eli and Marjorie and Frank for the previous one. That was really fun. Yeah, the international travel, I remember having an 18-hour flight from Dallas to Brisbane, and then an extra 6 hours from Brisbane to Perth. And yeah, that was a whole day loss. But anyway, happy to be on this panel. I think this is a really important conversation. So I was excited when I got invited to be on it. Keeping our top talent, keeping the people who are helping us and people who are making our lives easier, we hope. And, again, thanks to Courtney, thanks to the Presales Collective for the opportunity. This has been an amazing executive summit. And thanks to Reprise for the support. And just real quickly, another shout out for Jack Cochran. Very excited to see him take on the GM role for Presales Collective. It's going to be fantastic. But thinking about this, I remember, and this is back in, well, let's just say it's been a few years ago. I'm sitting there working away. I've got a global team, and I get a little message that pops up, says, "Hey, do you have 5 minutes for other people on my team?" And of course, I got 5 minutes. And to tell you how long ago this was, the message actually popped up on Lotus Same Time. So go look that up if you're not familiar with that. So anyway, the message pops up. Do you have 5 minutes? Yes, I have 5 minutes. I get a hold of the person, and they proceed to tell me they've had a wonderful time, but they're leaving. And it floored me. I was not ready for this. I was not expecting for this person of all people on the team to be ready to leave. And I didn't understand it. And it really, really bothered me. And it kind of set me down this path of, thinking about how do we take care of the team? How do we incent the team to remain around? How do we find out if someone's interested in leaving? So this idea of keeping top talent is something that means quite a lot to me. So I'm happy to be facilitating the conversation today. And welcome to my other panelists here. And just kind of reflecting on that story, does that resonate with you guys? I think, Ben, you've got a little different perspective on this one.
Yeah, it's interesting because I kind of saw it from the other side, and it kind of formed how I wanted to be. So my background, I spent like 7 years in big consulting. And one of the things you see there is that, at least where I was, you don't have a boss per se. It's kind of the project manager for whatever project you're assigned on is the one who does performance reviews and these kinds of things. And so as you get a handful of these, you very quickly start to see, right, like what strikes you as a leader that you want to work for and that you're engaged with, and one that doesn't. And I think one of the really common threads for me was leaders who tried to reach out and have these types of candid discussions about career. It wasn't necessarily always about being besties, right? But it was about feeling that level of trust and being able to go and have that conversation that can sometimes feel awkward, talking about your career to somebody who's in a way responsible for your career, especially when you're younger in your career. But seeing that really kind of formed. And when I got to leadership, I kind of came in with this real, guttural, this is how I want to act because of how I was wronged in my past life and these kinds of things, right?
That's fantastic. Thanks, man. I think we all bring that to these leadership positions, right? We've had these models before of people who we thought were good at it, maybe some who need a little more help. But yeah, we always want to try to improve that. For my experience, what the reason the person left back on my team in the olden days story I was sharing earlier is they didn't feel like they had a path, and so the only path they had was to go somewhere else. So that kind of set me down this path of really working to put together these career paths, and typically it's just a bit of a guidance, right, for different roles that someone could attain, and really trying to make sure that people on the team see that there is a path and there is a plan. I think particularly for people who are really good at pre-sales, we need that. We need to see how we're going to continue to grow. And if we don't see it where we're at, then we're probably going to start looking externally. So, we've talked about this a little bit, but Maria, I think you've got some interesting ideas on this idea of a career path or a framework.
Yeah. And a lot of it Ben was saying resonated with me too. It's understanding, with every SC that we have on our team, understanding what their individual goals are and aligning the right paths the opportunities that they're looking for. And, that could be uncovered in one-on-ones, getting to know them. I know here at HubSpot, whenever we have a new team member join, we do a working with me session to understand them as a person personally, but also their growth path and what they see for themselves too, right? Like, and over time you start to understand, do they want a leadership role one day, or are they more of in that subject matter expert track and want to be that SME, that person that is distinguished and you go to for those types of deals that are a little bit nuanced, right? And making sure that you map out those opportunities, because it's identifying, what those career paths look like and how it aligns to your business goals. And, if there is alignment there, if your organizations don't have these today, but things like clear defined competencies and frameworks of understanding each role and how they progress into the next role. And again, if it's leadership or it's in that individual track, providing stretch assignments too. If your folks are sort of in that itch to grow, how can we provide opportunities for them that might not be so formal, but could be in the way of, projects with upskilling their peers, collaborating cross-functionally, providing mentorship opportunities for those who do want to step into a leadership role. But it is understanding at the end of it, where is this person today? Where do they want to go? And how do the opportunities that we have internally at our companies align with their growth?
So right. So good. Thank you, Maria. Deirdre, you had something you want to add to that as well?
Sure. So one of the most effective strategies that I've found is doing an initial skill will assessment where I'm defining the clear expectations of each role. And it's not a job description. It's those core 5 to 10 things, and ensuring that we're all aligned on what they are. Then I go deep with them to learn what they truly care about. Why is it that they are doing what they do? Is it purely financial? Do they want to make an impact? Is work-life harmony while raising a family the most important factor? Do they want to be a thought leader? What skill gaps do they have that they want to fill? What new innovations do they want to learn more about? And so that allows us to have very connected conversations where we're aligned on the expectations and do this quarterly look back. And I'm their biggest champion and advocate. So help that, knowing what they want to accomplish and what's important to them helps me be able to present them with the right speaking opportunities, get exposure to the right people, ensuring that they can protect their time and protect their schedules, that sort of thing. As an example, I had one person on my team that wanted to take 2 hours in the middle of each day to have lunch with his son, and protecting that meant the world to him. He was the first person to volunteer for those early morning, late night requests and was a high performer on our team.
That's fantastic. Thanks for sharing that, Deirdre. And I love this skill will framework, right? I mean, you may like something, but you may not be good at it, or you may be really good at something that's not as much fun for you. So I think that's a really interesting framework to consider. Just as we're going along here for the audience, there's a lot of great engagement on the chat. So if you see me looking to my left, I've got the chat and then the Q&A opened up. So obviously we're going to take questions towards the end. So throw some questions in there for us. Otherwise we'll have to make some up, and no one ever wants that. But kind of moving along here. Anybody who knows me knows that I talk a lot about the human aspect of our role of connecting with not only our teams, but our customers and everything else. And we're all different in our needs. And Deirdre just kind of alluded to that as well. We got different needs, we got different motivations. How have you all incorporated that into some of your retention strategies? And let's throw this one to Ryan first.
Motivations. Well, first things first. You need to lead with empathy. I think empathy is the most important tool that we all have in our toolkit as leaders. It's extremely important that we're always leading with empathy. And the second thing I would say is we need to understand what we can control and what we can't control. At the end of the day, we can't motivate our people. They have to motivate themselves. That's really not in our control. But what is in our control is the work environment and the work conditions. And we can create a work environment that makes it easier for them to motivate themselves. And I believe the key to doing that is to really understand what their intrinsic motivation generators are. Is it autonomy? Is it mastery? Is it impact? Is it making a difference? And what do they need? Some people need, I need stability. Some people need constant change. Some people need different kinds of environments. So I think if we can focus on understanding what our people need and what their motivations are and try to do the best we can to create the working conditions that will help them get motivated, I think that's the best we can do as leaders.
Very good. What was the term there? Motivational?
Intrinsic motivational generators. And I wish I could take credit for that one, but that came from Daniel Pink, one of his
Very
books.
nice. Very nice. Ben, you had something you want to add to that?
Yeah, I mean, I completely agree. And I think again, it kind of comes back to this recurring theme here of just like kind of being able to have an honest, candid discussion about what people are looking for and what they want or don't want in their career. I think, and Ryan, you just said as well, like, look, there's some things as a manager we have control over, and there's some things we just don't have control over, right? And for me, I think, and again, I'm kind of jaded by my past in consulting where you get new managers very frequently. For me, I think there is, I think when you have that discussion and when you as a leader or manager are genuinely trying to help people out, even if things aren't always perfect, I think that's seen. And I think that's, again, getting back to building trust and building relationship. I think that kind of follow through to me as a manager is kind of one of the key things that we can do for retention. I can't, we can't always change salaries on a whim. There's a lot of things we can't do, but I think making sure that people are kind of heard and seen in this kind of stuff really, really drives a lot of that. And I think, like Ryan, you were alluding to as well, just understanding what motivates them. Is it, if they're all work-life balance, finding ways to make sure that they're covered and can get out the door at 5 o'clock. I've got one person that I work with who just really likes the being involved in the tough challenges and solving the tough problems. I can't give him every tough challenge, but he knows that I'm going to bring him in where I can because I know he likes those. And that is, I think, what's really important in building that kind of, that mutual respect and trust. And I think that goes a long way in retention.
Very good. Very good. Maria, bring us home on this one. You had some thoughts to share as well.
Yeah, and if this is new to folks of like how do I learn what motivates them, right? Like it is, and I know Brian mentioned it, leading with empathy, but driving it through discussions in your one-on-ones in the ways that you interact with them daily. It doesn't have to be formal conversations. Things like, in a one-on-one, what excites you most about your work right now? Or has that changed from the last time we spoke? Where do you see yourself in 1 to 3 years? And Ben mentioned it too, what types of areas do you have strengths in or energizes you? And you'll find that everyone has a different strength, and that can actually, in concert together with everyone else's strength, make you a really strong team. And so if there are no formal projects or opportunities where they can have an official title in that sense, they can start to flex that muscle in different ways. There's someone on my team loves technical documentation. He's the person who any Zoom call, any training, he will come up with that book and guide that was not provided by product, but he himself, and will share it amongst the team. And I love that, like just finding the area that he excels really well in and doing that organically will lead him to that next step in his career in a way that, again, doesn't take on a new title necessarily, but he's able to flex those muscles, grow in that area. And it's great because then everybody benefits. And it's really understanding too, if you are in tune with your team's, DISC assessments, personality assessments, that's another area to tap into because they might not know how to communicate what is that motivator for them. But if you take the time to, understand things like patterns, how do they show up in team meetings? How do they show up with their reps? You may, as a leader, find those opportunities for them that they may not even know are available to them in the role that they're in.
That's fantastic. A few of you have brought up the concept of one-on-ones. I think as a leader, that is the most critical single tool that we have for working with our team. I've had managers in the past where the only time you heard from them was when it was something bad, right? So if we do that, if the only time we're reaching out to our team is to give them, critical feedback based on a meeting that went poorly or didn't hit the objectives, then we're training them that every call is going to be that type of call. So have those regular one-to-ones, figure out what the schedule is for the team, but invest that. It will come back to you multiple times, I promise. Um, you know, we've talked about some of the aspects of bringing up the team, and mentorship and coaching, I think, is a really important piece of that. I've had a blast doing some mentoring for the Presales Academy people. And if you've not done that before, stick your hand up. Winnie and Liz would love to have you help out with that. It is so much fun. It's actually a light lift to be a mentor. It's a couple of phone calls and a mock interview. And I have gotten so much more out of that than I anticipated. I thought it was just something fun to do. And then I'm actually learning as well, which is always fun. And I've done some external coaching as well. So I think that's something that is really good for us to do as we, gain some expertise and we advance in our careers. Do any of you all have stories about using mentoring and coaching in your approach to developing your team? And when we were talking about this before, Maria, I know you had a really good example of that.
Yeah, actually at HubSpot, we have what we call the Flip the Script mentorship program. And it's where leaders, so managers and above in pre-sales, are paired, and they're the mentee in this. They're paired with an individual contributor, and they're the mentors. So they're the ones mentoring leaders. And the goal of this mentorship is to provide insight into what individual contributors on the floor are going through, that sometimes, manager and above, you can be a bit disconnected in what is happening. I know we've all probably been those SCs, but it can be, so from some of us, years now, and things are different. How does AI impact the way they sell? How are reps engaging with them? With a lot of competition there today, like, do we as leaders understand that in the lens of through the IC? So that's actually a unique mentorship program that we have here at HubSpot. But I do think just in general, mentorship is so transformative for the mentee, but also the mentor. If you have someone on your team who wants to jump into a leadership role, it's a great way to get them introduced to mentorship and coaching and see if they enjoy that part of the job. And it's also great for the mentee, because I think sometimes they come into those sessions thinking that person's going to give them all the answers, whether they realize really quickly it's a lot of like inflection, and they're going to have to look inward, and the mentors and the coaches are going to help them understand that. So it definitely helps transform teams to high performing ones for sure.
That's great. Thanks for that. Ryan, you've got some thoughts you want to share on this one?
Well, coaching is just such a vital part of our roles as people leaders. And I have to constantly remind myself to always be coaching, which is really easy to do when you've got positive feedback. And sometimes it's challenging when you have other kinds of feedback. So I think we always have to be coaching as people leaders. I think mentoring is vital for career development. And I encourage all of my people, get a mentor, be a mentor if you can, for a couple of reasons. One, I think, especially if you're managing people, it's so important to have someone who's outside of your reporting chain that you can just have a very candid conversation with and be open. I've gotten some great advice from that, knowing that, first of all, I can share what I'm thinking with this person, and I don't have to worry about any implications. And two, it's a fresh perspective. So this person is hearing this for the first time. They're not hearing about the situation that they may already have, some bias towards. And number two, I always find that having a mentor, and I try to aspire this when I am mentoring, is it just helps you pull your head up and sort of get out of your own headspace, get out of your own environment, and think about the big picture. And I find that it's so much easier to break down and craft a problem when you're able to pick your head up and just think a little bit more strategically. It's one of the most important things to do as a mentor.
That's great. I actually wrote down ABC is now always be coaching. I've heard some different, salesy things about it, but always be coaching I really like. Ben, why don't you bring us home on this one?
Yeah, I mean, look, I agree. And I think, as was just alluded to, I think they kind of serve two different purposes. I think, the idea of having a mentor, having somebody outside of your normal sphere that you can go to, that you can trust to get an outside view and get feedback and get advice. I think that that's absolutely critical. For you know, I think Ryan, I think you said like being able to pick your head up, and I love that analogy because I completely agree. It's like this is how you get out of the weeds and get back up to 10,000 feet again to look at the big picture of what's going on, right? I absolutely think coaching is important, especially as managers and leaders to be doing as well. You know, to be and it's again, it's tough finding that line, but I am a believer that like it is more important to give constructive criticism than pats on the back. I think you got to give pats on the back, right? But I think if you don't give people the constructive criticism, they can't grow. And I think that's one of the parts where I think a lot of managers have a tough time. And I think where their people sometimes feel it is by not getting enough of that. Here's what I think you can be doing, obviously in a well-intentioned way, right? But yeah, yeah.
Good stuff, guys. One last thing I want to say about mentors is, you know, obviously you can have mentors within your company, different teams and stuff like that. I did something really cool with a couple of people on my team. I actually went to the Presales Leadership Collective Slack and described the situation. I wanted to find some external mentors for people on my team. And a couple of people stepped up right away. Thank you very much. You know who you are. And I introduced those to the people on my team. They had some conversations like, hey, you know, figure out which one you vibe with the best. And that's been really cool. So, I mean, there's another way that we can leverage some of the things that the Presales Collective provides us. And I would encourage that. Moving on to this next subject, this is a tough one, right? So our profession is constantly changing. I mean, again, when I first started doing this, I had a VM on a CD. Y'all remember CDs, the little round shiny things. And it was the server, and it was the internet server, and it was the database. It was all these things because it was client server basically on a laptop. And not only were we scoping the solution, but we're also trying to figure out, okay, what does the server configuration that these people are going to have to purchase look like? So I'm glad we don't have to do it anymore. The cloud has helped those aspects. But if we look at today, everybody's going nuts about AI. And there are so many great things it can do, and there's so many challenges it's creating for us. So we're in this profession that's constantly changing. I think that's one of the things we all dig about it too, right? It's a different job all the time. I know I do. The tech is changing, the story is changing for marketing, the product is changing and growing. How do we think about, or how do y'all think about balancing this rapidly changing profession with the need to develop your team and continue to grow your team? I think that's a tough thing to maintain. Deirdre, we're going to come to you first on this one.
Sure. So I specifically hire team members that have flexibility, adaptability, and curiosity. If those are not skills of my existing team members, I help them develop those skills, because the ability to bring that creativity and new perspective to the team is a game changer. And it's important to me that everyone feels comfortable with change and has a willingness to explore new ways of doing things. As we know in sales, things are always changing and we always have to adapt, in addition to technology changing. So
very good. So you're looking for the Swiss Army knives. You're looking for a little bit of everything.
100%.
Maria, what are you doing to help out this balance?
Yeah, and I would say our team is going through a lot of change right now, and it's an exciting time for HubSpot. But with that, you know, some people on the change curve, they're much more quicker to adopt to change than others. And it's remembering our why. You know, why are we changing? What's in it for them? Why this is an opportunity for everyone. And I always like to remind my team too that change is inevitable, but growth is optional. And so trying to get to them, like, where is it for them? How can they see themselves in that part of the change and how they're going to grow from it? But it's also making sure that we foster a psychologically safe environment for folks to share how they feel. I mentioned, you know, some folks may not be as adapting to change as others, and recognizing that and giving a space for your team to share with either you or as a group, you know, environment, and making sure that we understand what they're saying, listen to what they're saying, and then slowly but surely shift the team's view on this to like a business-centric mindset, right? Because a lot of the changes are because of growth and getting ahead of the curve. Ron, you mentioned AI, right? Like, how can we be proactive? How can we formulate those opinionated stances on what's going to change and getting ahead of it? And maybe even getting our teams involved in the proactiveness of the change. I know some things that we do here with a lot of the change that's going on is going out into breakout rooms and formulating a team that is for the change, why the change is good, other team, why it's not so great, and coming together because you're going to have people in both of those teams that probably believe one way or the other, not the one team that they're aligned to, but coming together and understanding that there are positives and negatives, but at the end of the day, like, it's coming, it's happening, and how can we align to either disagree and commit, or really help everyone else get on board. So it can be a scary time, but also a great time to seek opportunities and drive innovation.
Nice. I really like that idea of having the team kind of debate both sides of the issue. That's really interesting. Ryan, why don't you wrap this one up for us?
So I really love the strategies that both Deirdre and Maria shared. I think they're really great. It's getting me thinking. The one thing that I would just add is to say that, we all got into this profession because we want to develop people. Hopefully, that's why we got into this profession. I had a manager who used to say, and to steal this from her, she used to say, I could walk across the street tomorrow and get hit by a bus, and this place would go on just fine without me. But if our people stop showing up tomorrow, the company's dead. And, I think that just goes to show the gravity of why we need to take care of our people. But having said that, I think we all need to understand as leaders is we are going to find that at times we're going to need to pivot and change, especially in this industry. And there are going to be those that aren't going to want to take the journey with us. And I think it's a very critical mistake to choose to avoid making a necessary pivot in the interest of trying to keep everyone happy and content and morale is high. So I think it's an important balance that we need to do. I think we need to identify that when it happens, when those people on our team are in that position. We need to support them and, help them find a path that's going to make them successful. And it's not necessarily by avoiding a necessary change in the business.
Right, Ryan, thanks for bringing that. I think that's a really important point. And it reminds me of the story about like home maintenance. Like, something goes wonky in your home and you kind of notice it, but it's like, I'll just go ignore it for now. The longer you ignore it, the bigger the problem is going to be, the bigger the solution, the more expensive it's going to be down the road. And I think that is a perfect parallel to problems or challenges within our team. It's there. Sometimes it's like, well, we're really busy. I don't think I'll get an open head count to fix it or anything else. And we just, kick the can down the road. The earlier you can address those things and have those difficult conversations and make the proper corrective action, I think you can really save yourself a lot of trouble down the road. So for some of you new leaders, listen, you see all this, the head shaking, right? It's a thing. So just keep that in mind. All right. One common thing I notice about pre-sales people is, sometimes maybe we're just a little bit stubborn. We're very opinionated, right? On top of that, a lot of people are just resistant to change. And if you've not read the book, Who Moved My Cheese, that's a classic that you should go check out just with the subject of change management. But I wanted to ask some of the panelists here, Ben and Ryan, coming to you guys for this one, but what are some of the common resistance point you hear from your experienced SEs, and what are some of the tactics you use to address that? And Ben, we'll come to you first on this one.
Sure. I think in general, in terms of resistance, it's from my experience, it hasn't been a lot of, no, I'm not going to do this, but it's slowing adoption, right? It's like, it's slowing things down and not kind of jumping headfirst in. From my point of view, in terms of how do you address it, to me, I think that the magic word here is transparency. I think, and Deirdre mentioned it earlier, you mentioned curiosity, and that's one of like the big things that I'm looking for when I'm hiring as well, because this is a role where you need somebody that wants to dig in and learn and understand more. And I think, when you get somebody of that type, and especially an engineer type mentality, and if you tell them like, this is changing to this, start doing it, I think they're like, I already got a way to do it. Like, I'm fine. I think when you can get to that next layer of like, look, we spent time analyzing why people are churning and we found this. And so we're changing this because it's going to have customers stay or retention or expand, whatever, the item is. I think that really gets to that curiosity side of them and gets them, oh, okay, I see what's going on here. And it kind of drives that that kind of that willingness, that drive to get on board. To me, that's really the big picture is making sure they feel read in so that they can feel like they're on board and not just following orders, right? Not just doing a thing, but that they are working toward the goal.
You're helping them understand the why. Oh, that's why you want to do it. Fine, I'm on board with it, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Very good. Very good. Ryan, what do you have to say to that?
I'd like to pick up on that last point. I think it's a great point that you make, Ben, is helping people understand the why. I think so many times as leaders, we fall into a trap of going, come on, don't you want us to be successful? Don't you understand this is the path forward? I shouldn't have to explain the why. And the reality is, no, you do have to explain the why. That is part of your role. That is part of your job. People will get behind you and they will get behind our direction even more, if they understand why. So I think that's vitally, vitally important. Being resistant to change, that is a natural human reaction. I think we make a mistake if we feel that resistance and we say, well, this person's going to be a problem because they're not on board. They're just expressing a natural human reaction. I think the best way to work through that is, first of all, I'll go back to the discussion we were having earlier about leading with empathy and just understanding where someone is. Am I talking to someone who really needs to, be in a stable environment? Or am I talking to someone who thrives in chaos? Or is it somewhere in between? Let's meet them where they're at. Let's understand their concerns. Let's make sure we're over communicating the why. And I mean, ultimately, I think that's the best way to get partnership moving forward. But, again, resistance is natural. It doesn't mean they're not going to be great in this new environment or in the next stage.
That's great stuff. And Courtney just kind of dropped in the chat, what's in it for me, right? You're explaining the why. And that's something, Brian, you make a good point. It's something we have to keep in our mind as leaders. We're not like parenting the toddler. It's like, put the crayon down and don't draw on the wall because I told you so. It's like, here's why we're not drawing on the wall, because paint's expensive. I've got one last kind of group question for a couple of you. And then I've got some individualized questions that you may not know about. So that'll be fun. So, we talked earlier, I think, Ryan, you actually brought this up, control what you can, right? There's a whole prayer around that. Teach me how to control what I can and not worry about all this other stuff. And there's a lot that we don't control. Comp, we can influence, but we really can't just go in there and write them a check. Benefits, other things are outside of our sphere of control. But if we think about controlling the things that we can, what are some of the things that you've done or we can do to retain and attract that top talent? And Deirdre, let's come to you first on this one.
Sure. So I think serving team members as if they are our most important buyers or customers is a great philosophy, because they truly are, right? If we take an interest in each person's life and helping them achieve what they care about and what matters to them, collaborating together, fostering an atmosphere of fun and helping others, I think that goes a long way.
Well said. Fantastic. Ryan, you have anything to add to that?
Well, I think, I'll go back to the question. What can I control? Well, I can control what I do. I can control what I say. I can control how I choose to communicate. I can probably control a lot of factors in someone's work environment that might even bleed into their personal lives. So I think we need to focus on, there are certain things that are outside of our control. And going back to our last discussion, I think maybe a little bit of the why things are the way they are and over communicating that can help. But I think we need to take a really close look at what people need, what our people need, and think about what is in our control that we can influence to make their lives better and help them be more happy and roll and be more productive.
Very good. Very good. Ryan, I want to add one more thing to your list. I can control how I respond to something, right? I think that's a really good one too. All right. I want to come to some individualized questions here. So Maria, this is yours. Budgets are always a challenge for pre-sales. Everybody's being asked to do more with less. We're looking for ways of developing our team that may not take money, maybe special projects or something like that. You had a really interesting story about how you got your reps involved with enabling your salespeople. So You want to
Mhm.
share more about that with the audience?
Yeah, this actually came as an idea as true solutions engineers finding solutions to problems. It actually was a problem, and I wouldn't say a problem, but reps wanted more enablement around the product, and HubSpot being so big and sometimes getting access to the product team can be challenging. So first place to go is your SEs. And we have some really great SEs on the team that like to teach others how to use a solution, keep up to date with the products, and make sure their reps feel armed and ready for that. So this actually came from conversations that reps and SEs were having. And so we're now maybe like a third iteration of this, but trying to scale because we have so many teams at HubSpot. How do we make it so that this is a much more formal and scalable process? So what we've done is we're actually in the process of capturing additional team members who want to be part of this coalition of SEs that are educating their reps, and hosting, like, whether it's a monthly learning session or as those product updates come out, having it through the lens of why the seller should care. So I think a lot of the product enablement that we get sometimes can be very high level, can be very focused on the features. But what our SEs are doing is sharing it through the lens of like why the rep should care, what they should see on upcoming demos as it changed to the demo flow and structure. And it's been great. We've been able to provide opportunities for SEs who like to enable their reps and each other in on this, and also have them gain visibility through other sales managers, sales reps that they don't work with today. Because a lot of their careers lies on the experience that the reps and the sales managers have. So it's been a great way to build that relationship with our sales team, but also strengthen the skill sets of those who did want to be more on that enablement side.
That's great. I love that aspect of it too, right? It's another touch point for building that relationship and that partnership. I think that's super critical. Some of you may not know this, but there's actually a legal requirement to have the words KPIs and metrics in an executive summit session. So to that end, Deirdre, what are your thoughts as far as KPIs, metrics, or things that we can monitor or track to determine if we're being successful with these retention efforts or not?
Well, as I mentioned earlier, we use the skill will assessment, which uses a 4-box approach. The reason I like it is because it's not overcomplicated. It uses a 5-point scale to measure willingness and abilities, and it serves as an early warning system to help us know where we need to improve, and it minimizes those retention surprises. So the simplicity of it is that it actually plots people in one of 4 boxes, and then you have specific coaching guidance to get them up to the top right, which is the high skill, high will. Usually when people start out at a new company, they're low skill, but they have high will. And over time, they become high skill and high will, which is where high performance truly exists. So I like that from a KPI perspective. It takes tenure, and it takes all of these other things off the table, and it just looks at where is a person today in a snapshot in time.
That's great. I love that phrase, retention surprise. So that story I told earlier at the beginning, that was a retention surprise. So I'm going to borrow that from now on, if you don't mind.
Sure thing.
All right. Ben, we're going to ask you to pull out your crystal ball and tell us what trends in retention pre-sales leaders should be aware of going forward.
So I think what we're going to see is kind of a formation of like a new subculture within kind of software. So right now there's kind of sales and there's CS or customer success or whatever. I know there's a bunch of different buzzwords for all of these, of course. And oftentimes I think pre-sales kind of gets bucketed into one or the other. And I think what we're going to find is more of an SE culture that stands out on its own. So like, for example, trainings or offsites that have sales trainings, but are also hackathons, right? Kind of hitting both sides of that skill set and touching the different items there. I think, and if I'm honest, partially because of communities like this and things like this, I think we're going to see more of a rise of SE as kind of its own entity and its own kind of subculture, kind of separating away from kind of falling into sales or falling into CS as we've done a lot of the time historically. I think it's, you're going to see that in the broadening, in that combination of the way the softer and the harder skills, the softer and the more technical skills get combined. Because the way we play the game is quite different from most of the other organizations, right? Because we've got to be on the value side and on the technical side. And I think that's going to start standing on its own 2 feet more and more.
Very good. Very good. Let's wrap this up with Ryan. Your question is, if you had a way to travel back in time, and you're going back to your early leadership, Ryan, and what piece of advice would you give yourself about your talent and retention that would help you out today?
How come I got the campfire question? Oh boy. See, if I walk backward through time and just trudge through the litany of mistakes I've made since I started doing this job, I think I'd land on this one. So everyone wants to work for someone that they can learn from. And I think the piece of advice that I would give myself back then is, that doesn't mean that they want to learn from a manager that is a great SE, that is the best of best SE. You can have more influence on someone, and you can give someone more headroom to grow by using the coaching tools and the situational leadership tools that are at your disposal, versus trying to be one to give them the answer. And I think I've just found that, going back to the tools around understanding where someone's competency is and what their level of confidence is, and assessing if they really need to be directed, or they just need a little bit of encouragement, or they need to be pointed in the right direction versus telling them exactly what they should be doing, is probably one of the best improvements I've made over time. And I think it's certainly key to retaining great people.
Well, listen, that was a great answer, even without the campfire. So thank you for that. Wrapping up here, I mean, I've been taking some notes as we've been going along here, and just some of the key takeaways that I've got are having that framework for career development, super important, whether it's career path or something like that. But thinking about the individual, thinking about the human, and what do they bring to the table uniquely? How do we meet them where they're at? I love that phrase we had earlier. Different ways, different strategies for motivating the team and getting them engaged. Managing through change. And again, that book that I mentioned, Who Moved My Cheese, just a simple, easy read, really helpful for change management concepts. And then, how do we know if it's working? What are the metrics we can look at? I like Deirdre's little chart there where we can try to move people into high skill and high will. Are there other things? And does tenure create some problems? So just lots of great thoughts. I want to thank my panelists so much for a wonderful conversation. We've got about 6 minutes for questions, and we do have a couple of questions in the chat. So we had kind of picked a round robin here. So I forget who is the first to answer the question, but I'll read out the question and you can just jump in on the answer. But this is from Patrick McGraw regarding change management. Many times the ones most resistant to change are the ones who have been the most successful historically. That was me back then. I think this is because they have the if it ain't broke, don't fix it approach. Any specific suggestions for getting through to these rock stars? Not everybody at once.
I'm happy to jump in on this one. I think for me, when I see people like this, a lot of times this is either somebody that's been there for a long time, and so they're super comfortable, or you've got a full-on skeptic type of mentality where it's like, the new thing is what I'm going to do it my way. And I'm totally going to be a broken record here, but I think in both of these cases, the answer is really to kind of going under the hood a little bit on why we're doing what we're doing, and driving back to why is this happening? Yes, we're changing your stuff. I know change is hard. Nobody likes change. But there's a point here. And I think grounding in that is the best way to try and push back against that resistance.
Yeah, love it. Love it. Explain. We're naturally curious, people who are typically good at this. So tell us why we're doing it, and we'll be on board. We may not agree with it, but just tell us why. The next question we've got, Chris Dormafal, Chris, I hope I didn't butcher that too badly. I'd love to hear some creative SE spiff ideas that the panel has used to build morale on their teams while also pushing to serve the business.
So I'll throw out something I used to do. And we all have different environments. Sometimes you've got the ability to spend some money and do some fun things around compensation. Other times you got to get a little bit creative. One of the things that I used to do is every quarter I would have a game ball, and I'd pick, whatever time of the year it was football season, I'd have football, or if it was summertime, I'd get to baseball, and everybody on the team would sign it. And we would give away a few. One would be, the person that had, the most revenue that quarter. Other would be the team would vote on who helped out, the most. And then we'd look at maybe the sales team and say, you guys vote for the MVP who came up and, did the most for the company. And I think just, a token gesture that everyone else put their name on, they could put on their desk or in their office and, kind of remember that was really big morale. And everyone after a while made kind of a big deal of accumulating those. So that was just a fun, low cost idea to just drive some good behaviors.
Totally agree.
Nice.
I've done this in the past as well. And like bragging rights are super real, right? Like there's something motivating, I think, to a lot of people to have that trophy, even if it's just good-natured competition. Yeah, sorry, jumping in because I love the idea as well. Yeah.
No, trophies are great. One of the things I was going to grab it, but it would take too long. Over on my shelf is I've got a goofy little plastic award that says Trusted Guru that my company gave me one year. And that meant a ton to me, right? I mean, it's not worth anything. I can't sell it. I can't pick up some bucks, but I like it. So yeah, I think recognition is always a nice one. I went to the chat and pulled this question out from Katie Sedgwick. And Deirdre, I think this is one perfectly matched to some of the things you've talked about. Katie says, would love to hear the panelist perspective around dealing with a difference of opinion on the leader's view of a skill versus the individual contributor's view of their skill set. In other words, a mismatch of us as a leader seeing a need to improve and the IC seeing themselves as a rock star.
That's a great question. So what we do is the first step is a self-assessment where the individual rates themselves. And then the leader does the leader rating on that person who did their self-assessment. And then the third step is they get together for a one-on-one and they discuss the final ratings. They're not always going to agree, but it forces the dialogue, it forces the connection. They come to an agreement and the final score isn't posted until they both agree.
Very nice. So you're using some evidence kind of like in front of them and getting their buy-in. That's fantastic.
Yeah, and it forces the discussion, right? If I as a leader rate someone, a 3.1 on something, on a particular skill, and the individual says, well, I'm actually a 4.0 and here's why, and has compelling evidence, I'm changing my score, right? But if they are unable to, they usually back down and say, well, yeah, you're right. I overrated myself, right? So it becomes connected conversation and it deepens the relationship, which is what you want.
Good stuff. I hope everyone, was able to get some nuggets out of this session. This has been a blast. Again, I want to thank the panelists with me. We're all pretty friendly humans. So, connect with us on LinkedIn if we're not connected, and let's keep the conversation going over there. But that's going to wrap it up for us. I'm going to hand it back over to Courtney.